Yo me llamo Manuel Solis, yo soy de Language Line Solutions y ahora vengo a hablar con ustedes acerca de los idiomas, las diferencias, los retos que tenemos. Oh my God, right? That's it. Ay caramba. Oh my God. How many of you understood what I said? A little bit? Okay. You guessed. Imagine your dispatchers are encountering this every single day. Every single day. And not just being a friendly call from the other side. Necesito ayuda. Por favor, ayúdeme ahorita. Mi niño me está ahogando. Mi abuelo se está teniendo un ataque de corazón. Necesito ayuda. The emotions are high. Your dispatchers don't know what they're saying. And those are the challenges that they're encountering every single day. Not just in California, nationwide. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. The challenges that your dispatchers, call takers are having every day, and how can we assist them in overcoming some of these challenges. The ideal situation is having bilinguals for over 200 languages in your center. Is that possible? I don't think so. You might cover certain languages, but not all of them. Because here in California, in 2013, there was 91 different languages requested from us. 91. And there were emergencies. Look at the challenges. Raise of hands. How many are dispatchers or have been dispatchers? Okay, few. So you know what I'm talking about, the challenges that you encounter. But also, a big factor that comes to play are your beliefs and values. Let me ask you a simple question. It's a very delicate question. Should we provide interpretation to the callers calling in for help in a different language? I see a lot of nodding heads. Why? Sir, why? Why should we?
Because when somebody's in trouble, no matter what the situation, you're going to try to help them out any way you can, and you do that by speaking the language that you're most comfortable with.
But I've heard that if they're in our country, they should speak English. Okay.
Hey, let's face it, even the English guys don't speak English right. They speak American.
Okay, American. Because I hear this throughout the nation, that people that are in our country should speak the language. If they're enjoying the benefit of our country, they should speak it. And if they call for help, hey, speak by our language. And that's how I hear it throughout the nation. But let me ask you a question. How many of you have taken a foreign language? Oh, quite a few. 4 years? 3 years? 4 years? Jeff, what language? Spanish. ¿Tú sabes hablar? ¿Me entiendes lo que estoy diciendo?
Hola, Lupe.
Okay. Okay, that's 4. Okay, 4 years of Spanish. Okay, who had more than 4 years? How many language? Or how many years? 6 years of what language?
Spanish, Portuguese.
Okay, ¿usted me entiende lo que estoy diciendo? ¿Cómo?
Totalmente.
Totalmente, muy good. Pero 6 años. Okay. The point I'm trying to make is that it takes time to learn a language. It takes time. Look at all the opportunities that you've had in trying to learn a language, because you're excited, you're going on vacation, and you're going to practice your language that you learned. And we all go through that. And what happens? You travel to a foreign country, you start trying to speak the language that you just learned, and what happens? Like, no entiendo. Okay? It takes time. And so there's something you got to think about. It takes time to learn a foreign language. And number two, you also have to understand, they know, the people that are limited in English, they know the road to success is the language. Language connects to our culture. So they know, and they're working very hard to learn the language because they know that's the road to success. So all of us in the 911, we need to provide that empathy, find that help. And that's the biggest challenge. But the question is, how can we overcome that? So our beliefs and values make a big difference here. And if you're open to ideas that I'll be sharing this morning, this would help your call takers and dispatchers overcome some of these challenges when they hear someone screaming in a different language. Any question on anything I just talked about? Because this is the foundation of this talk. A couple of things we're going to talk about. Like anything, we're going to have a quiz. Don't be scared. We're talking about the survey where we came up with this information. Because again, all this information is firsthand information that we surveyed our interpreters to find out what do they recommend to the call takers, dispatchers, to help them handle the call a lot better. But let me ask you a question, even before I get into that. Do you know how the system works? How the interpreter comes on the line? Because again, what happens is that when someone calls in a foreign language, they're calling in and say, necesito ayuda. Your dispatcher says, no entiendo, or un momento. Then they press a button and they bring the interpreter on the line. And they have a three-way conference call. So the dispatcher says it in English. How can I help you? The interpreter starts getting all these ideas in that language and then says it to the caller. ¿Cómo le puedo ayudar? How can I help you? Whatever the caller says, the interpreter processes those ideas, those words, and tells the dispatcher, I can't find my car. My son is in trouble, whatever it is. So it's a back and forth process. And that's some of the challenges that it encounters. Because again, dispatchers, call takers, when they speak English, they're very direct. Back and forth. But with an interpreter in the middle, they're waiting for the interpreter to interpret that information. So the call's a lot longer. And therefore, it makes it more challenging for the dispatcher. So that's the process. Go ahead.
Does the dispatcher have to know what language is being spoken to them before they hit the button, you say, to bring on the interpreter? I mean, if there's 91 different languages or dialects within a language, how does that work?
The beauty of this is that, and I'll get into more into that, is that your responsibility as a dispatcher, they don't have to figure out the language. That's our job. The job of the person that calls up. The only job is to get us on the line, and we know how to decipher it. Like, for example, Mandarin Cantonese, Vietnamese. How do you know the difference between Vietnamese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean? You don't know. Same thing in the Middle Eastern language. Farsi, Arabic. How do you know? You don't, but you're not exposed to it. However, our interpreters are. That's the only thing they do, just like you do, your area of expertise. That's what we do. We'll figure that out for you. So our job is to get us on the line so we can help, assist you. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, here's the quiz. What is the number one sports in the U.S.? In the U.S. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Okay, how many basketball? Baseball? Football? Yep, football. Football is number one sports in the U.S. What is the number one sport in the world? Soccer, no question about it. How many languages are spoken in the world today? A. How many people say A? 8,500. We got 1, 2. B. 6,800. 4. Okay, 5 people. C. 2,500. Okay, a little more than 5. The answer is B. 6,800 languages. Keep in mind, the language service companies provide over 200 languages. In California, as I stated, in 2013, 91 different languages were requested. Okay, there's a big gap there. Big gap. And that's the challenge of providing that service. Because again, every single day, your dispatchers are encountering different languages. And because you're encountering different languages, you're asking the language company, do you have this language? That's the challenge that we all have every single day, because more and more languages are coming into our country. Once again, we're here to serve them, and this is a challenge for all of us. For example, we had a situation in Oxnard, here in California, that they called me up and said, Manny, someone was requesting Mixteco. How many people know what Mixteco language is? Okay. Mixteco is an Indian language from Mexico, in the state of Oaxaca, southern part of Mexico. Okay, let me do more homework here. Let me provide this information to my operation people. We need Mixteco. People are asking us for Mixteco. We started doing some homework on that. Can you believe that there's 156 different dialects of Mixteco? But you're asking me you want a Mixteco interpreter. Which one? Which one should we provide to you? Then, getting a Mixteco interpreter that speaks English. That's the other challenge. Well, maybe we could find a Mixteco interpreter that speaks Spanish, where we could find a Spanish and English interpreter and have 2 interpreters in the middle so we could assist you. And these are the challenges in trying to assist 911 dispatchers, because there's more and more languages coming to our country, and we need to assist them. So what are the top languages in the world? Number 1, your guess. Spanish? Chinese? Chinese. That's it. We're talking about Mandarin and Cantonese combined.
There's more than 2.
There's a lot of more dialects, so you're absolutely right. Correct. So when we say Chinese, we're talking about Mandarin, Cantonese, plus all the other dialects. Spanish. How many countries speak Spanish? Quite a few. English. Our English. The Australian English. English from England. New York English. Yeah, someone asked me before, Manny, do you have an interpreter that could interpret someone speaking English from the South? Like, let me look into that. Let me figure out what I could do about that. Interesting enough, the service was founded by a police officer here in San Jose. And this is where it all started, the industry. And the beauty of this is that this was during the time where San Jose was getting an influx of Vietnamese people. And so this officer received a 911 call. Go to San Jose, there's an emergency. He went down there. The majority of the people there were Vietnamese. The man that called 911 came out running. Like any good officer, what did the officer do? Okay. He was ready with his hand on his gun. And so with all that commotion, the neighbors came out. And this little boy came out and started interpreting for the man and the officer. The reason why the man called 911 was because his daughter had missed her curfew, which was at 11 o'clock that night. That was the emergency. Think about it. Look at the danger, the incident could have happened if it wasn't for that little help of helping them interpret that conversation. The man was hysterical. And from there on, this officer thought, we got to do something for the community. Let's ask for volunteers. And so therefore, he found volunteers to assist them in being interpreters. But we know as volunteers, what happens? Sometimes people show up, people don't show up. So he teamed up with a professor from Monterey. What's in Monterey? The Monterey Language Institute. And that's how the company started. And a lot of you know the company as AT&T Language Line because AT&T bought the company. So a lot of you might have heard AT&T Language Line. That's what it is. And AT&T bought it from this fellow, this police officer. So our information, our firsthand information, comes from our interpreters, and we have a lot of experience from that. So the way it's all started is that the dispatchers was asking questions. Manny, I get these calls, and sometimes they talk too much. Manny, this and that. Manny, sometimes I don't understand what do they want, or why do they share information with me? And so for us to have valid information, we survey our interpreters. We have over 6,000 interpreters, and we survey them. Can you help us help the dispatchers with information? And that's what they did. They gave us a lot of information about what are the problems that you see, the top problems, and what are the recommendations. And that's the basis of this talk. The key problem, number one, problem with address. And you're thinking, what? Problem with address? What's the big deal about that? Everybody should know where they live. Not exactly. It's like, why? Why do they know? Well, we have to peel the onion, find out a little bit more about the people calling in. Number one, the difference in the alphabet. Have you ever thought about the Chinese Arabic language? How do they write their words? characters. How do we write our words? The Latin alphabet. So if you're speaking that someone is speaking Mandarin or Cantonese, and you're trying to say, what's the name of your street? And we're saying that, they're thinking characters. They're not thinking about our alphabet. They're thinking about their alphabet. And that's a challenge for the dispatcher. Because like, how simple is that? But again, that is a challenge. The different alphabet from one language to another. Another one is the ignorance of address. Do you know that in certain countries, they don't use addresses? I live around the church. I live around the museum. I live in front of that park. That's how they communicate, providing directions in their own country. For example, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal in 2012 that talked about that, where Pizza Hut wanted to deliver pizzas in Costa Rica. And they were having a hard time because when someone would call and order a pizza, they would ask them, what's your address? Oh, no, I live across the street from the drugstore. So the drivers, you had to know that city very well. So people that are calling in for 911 have this mindset. And so sometimes they don't even know, they live there, but they don't know their address. And that's one of the challenges that your dispatchers encounter. The other item is the level of literacy of the LEP, which means for a limited English proficiency speaker. Where a lot of people, unfortunately, are not educated, or they haven't graduated from 6th grade or even high school, where they don't know their alphabet in their own language. And that makes it very difficult if your dispatcher says, well, can you spell me the street? Because they don't even know how to spell it in their own language, which makes it more difficult. For example, many moons ago, I wanted to teach English as a second language. I was 21, I was excited, I was pumped up, I had my agenda. I'm going to teach them about the subject, predicate, verb, adjective. I'm ready to go. And so I started talking about that. Okay, you know how to start a sentence. You got to have a verb, a subject, and all that. And they just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, do you understand what I'm saying? No. Did you get this type of information where you came from? No, I had to drop out because I had to go work. My family was very poor, and I didn't go to school. So my whole plan changed. I started teaching them the basics. Red, green light, yellow light. Where's the bathroom? ¿Dónde está la cerveza? Where's the beer? The basic stuff for survival. And so your dispatcher are encountering this every single day. Also, keep in mind, when your dispatcher calls an interpreter, they could be anywhere. So they're not familiar with your area. So it's like, if your dispatcher says, is that around the corner from Grant Street? The interpreter doesn't know. Because that person could be in the state of Washington, Oregon, Florida, Texas, you name it. The job of an interpreter is just to relay the message, not to inject anything else. So that's the relationship that the dispatcher, the interpreter, and the caller have. And the interpreter is just to relay. So what can we do to overcome these challenges? In some centers, the dispatchers have access to the information where the person is calling. So they could verify that. However, in some centers, they're not allowed to provide that information. So it all depends on your center what's acceptable. So that's one way to try to overcome in trying to get the address. Work with the interpreter in asking clarifying questions. That might assist. Maybe having the caller spell out the street they're in. That's another option. You're going to be successful? We don't know, but at least you could try it. The other one is find a piece of mail. Sometimes that's the best solution. They might receive mail, and you can say, can you go and get a piece of mail and see what address you have there? And that could assist them. Again, because your dispatchers know the cities or your own county, you might say, are you around this neighborhood? Are you around that McDonald's across the big mall? So anything you could think of, or the dispatcher could think about to assist them to get the address. Because the biggest challenge, if your dispatcher cannot get the address, they can't do their job. They can't dispatch. So they dispatch fire, police, ambulance, who? So therefore, that's this is crucial to get that information. Another person suggested the DMV license plate. If they could provide a license plate number, and hopefully that dispatcher could work backwards and see which license plate is registered to get the address. Do you have any suggestions? Some suggestions. Have you heard anything else that could assist your dispatcher get the address? No ideas. Okay. Another challenge is getting to. Oh, go ahead.
What about having the caller look at your phone bill? The address on the phone bill.
You're talking about the caller?
Or phone they dispatch for 911.
See, yeah, exactly. See, and these are the ideas that needs to be shared to the dispatchers. See, like, do this, do that. Because again, sometimes they're so emotionally involved in that call, they don't think. And so having some guidance, that's where you come into play and try to assist them. Like, ask them for the phone bill. And maybe that could assist them. Good idea. Thank you. Go ahead.
Are they using technologies tied back on from cell phones to give you their addresses or GPS coordinates that allow to monitor and try to lead people down?
Well, that depends on each center, depending on how well equipped they are in addressing that. So, does some centers have that? Or using?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If they call 911, but if they don't, and you don't have caller ID, I mean, another suggestion would be to have them hang up and call 911, so we do have that technology. But if they're calling from a cell phone and it's not initiated or initialized, I mean, there's a lot of variations to that.
Okay. So yeah, technology doesn't come into play if the call coming in the right means. Our style, we speak very direct. As part of the culture, we say how it is, the way it is. We're very direct. However, in other cultures, they want to tell you the whole story, how it occurred. I got up this morning. I was driving with my daughter, and we're going to breakfast, and bang, we got hit. I don't know why we took that road. We could have taken the other road, but my daughter did not want to listen to me. So we drove to this street, and we got hit. And I don't know why she didn't want to stop, and she got all upset, and we were going to have a nice day today. What information of all that helps the dispatcher dispatch? Nothing. However, understanding that different cultures, they like to tell stories. They want to tell you everything in their lives before they tell you the incident. And so if your dispatcher is not attuned to this, the frustration comes in. What do you want? Why are you calling me? I don't want to hear your story. I need to dispatch. So the point is, knowing more that different cultures tell stories, that's how it is. But the question is, what can you do to overcome that? Cut them off. Yes, you want to be nice. You want to be conscious about how they're feeling. But giving you the whole story doesn't bring any value for you to do your job. So our first suggestion is asking the caller briefly, in 1-2 sentences, what happened? What do you need? Using the interpreter. Okay? Telling the interpreter, briefly tell me what it is. Also, managing the interpreter. What do you mean by that, Manny? It's your job as a dispatcher to manage the interpreter, because the interpreter could listen to the caller as long as they want, but you don't know what they're saying. And that's where the frustration comes in. So therefore, if you've given them enough time, that's where you come in and says, interpreter, what's the emergency? How can we help them? And you got to be stern about that. Because at the end of the day of all this, who's responsible for the call? You. It's your call. Yeah, you could call the language company and say, hey, your interpreter did a terrible job, but it's your call at the end of the day. No question about it. So educating your dispatchers on what they need to do to manage the interpreter. Any question on that? Keep in mind, a lot of cultures, they love to tell stories. Another issue that we encountered, fear of authority. Why should we be fear of authority? Everybody's nice, right? However, many people, where they come from, authorities are not nice. They have this fear of providing too much information to the police officer, to anyone who has authority. Why should they? Well, if they know too much about you and you have, quote unquote, a little bit more than your neighbors, guess what? They might steal your house, steal your possession. Or they could get bribed. All that, they come with that mindset. And when they call and they're asking questions and you're asking questions, what's your emergency? How many people live there? How many kids do you have? They're like, they're thinking, what do you want that information for? And you're doing it to do your job, so therefore you could protect that family. But for their mind, they're thinking, what do you want all this information for? So you have to understand, that's their mindset. That's where they're coming from. And you have to educate your dispatcher saying, remember, not all countries have the same respect for authority as we do here. In other countries, they do fear authority, and we have to be conscious about that. And therefore, they're afraid to give information to us. So the question is, what can we do to overcome that? Ask them why you want the information. It's very simple. Ask them, I need this information to assist you. I need this information because then I know which agencies to dispatch. Fire, ambulance, or fire. Giving them that explanation might assist your dispatcher in getting more information from them. And that is the biggest challenge. Getting information from the caller so they feel comfortable sharing that with you. Also, everything's based on the tone of your voice, the tone of the interpreter's voice, to say, I'm here to help. I'm not here to do anything harmful to you. And so hopefully with that, you'll give them that assurance that you're really there to help them out. Question on that? Yes?
The caller hears the dispatcher ask the questions of the interpreter as well.
That is correct. And that brings up a very good point. Even though a caller requests an interpreter, or you provide an interpreter, don't assume they don't understand English. Because again, keep in mind, think about the people that have taken a foreign language. Many students, they learn how to read and write and understand the language first, then speaking the language. Because again, speaking the language is a lot of work. Any language. So therefore, if you're saying something negative in English to the interpreter, or just out loud like, oh my God, this caller, I'm getting so tired of her. The caller might understand what you're saying. So you have to show the same respect to it, just like anybody. So keep that in mind. Good point.
Yeah, because at the heat of the moment, they may understand English, but they're going to call back to their first known language.
And that's what happens most of the time, is that they might feel comfortable speaking in English, but as soon as they have an emergency, they go back to the original language. It's just human nature. Even though they feel comfortable speaking English and the person understands, like, well, why should we have an interpreter? You seem to understand, but because they want to feel more comfortable and understand what you're saying, that's why they request an interpreter. Thank you. The other challenge that I think we touched on is the different language, the dialects from the different regions. When I spoke Spanish, some of you understood what I was saying. But the Spanish that you hear from Mexico or from South America, from Spain, there's a variation there. Same thing as English. The English we speak here in California is different to New York, to the South, from England to Australia, down the list. And again, that's another challenge. You might get an interpreter that speaks Spanish, but depending on what region that interpreter is from. For example, when someone says, my cat is lost, someone says, how do you say cat in Spanish? Gato. My gato está perdido. Someone from Puerto Rico might hear gato as a jack of a car. Gato is gato. Gato is a small animal, the cat, but also means jack of a car to change a tire. So once again, it changes. So it makes a difference that in Spanish, there's a lot of variation, just like in English. And those are the challenges. Same thing in, we get requests from Russian people calling in Russian. I need a Russian interpreter. The challenge is, when you start talking to them, they really speak Ukrainian. Why did they request a Russian interpreter in the first place? Huh?
Because they're being invaded.
Well, yeah, they were invaded, yeah. It was one, exactly, the USSR. Everybody spoke Russian until they broke off and they're getting back together again. Well, that's a whole different story. But again, that's how people think it's better to get a Russian interpreter because there's more than Ukrainian. They don't think the Ukrainian is available. So once again, it makes a difference these are the challenges for different languages. So it's not easy for your dispatchers to distinguish what language it is, the dialects, the accents, and everything else. But the question is, what can we do about it? There's not much we can do about it. It's just working with the interpreter and having patience and trying to understand what they're trying to say. There's really no solution, unfortunately. There's no magic behind this. Knowledge of 911. We should be blessed. We have a great system of 911 in this country. How many people have gone to a different country and seen the 911 operations? What country? China. And how is it down there?
Well, they use 119.
Okay, yeah, first of all, the number, okay?
Different number for law, for fire, and for medical.
Mm-hmm. And how's the operation?
So,
Yeah. How about the community? Do they have a respect for 911 or 111?
in China, the police are a function of the military,
Okay,
so they have that military presence.
okay. I saw another hands. 911 who visit another country? Colombia. And how was that down there? Yeah. Yeah, I was fortunate to visit 911 centers in Mexico with when it was a conference down there. Same thing. The technology is not there. The infrastructure is not there. The way they communicate to dispatch a police officer, an ambulance, fire was a mess from one center to another to another. Yes?
But actually, the biggest thing about Colombia is that the majority of the phones down there are cell phones.
Okay.
They don't, many times you don't have a wired phone, so it's like I say, it's a
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing that I think, listening and visiting in other countries, that we should be very proud of what we've done. We should be feeling really good. Because I think one thing also, our society, that we respect 911. And it starts in a very early age with our children. School doing a great job in educating the respect of 911. And unfortunately, other countries don't have the same respect. In Mexico, they knew between 3 and 4 o'clock, their call volume went up. Why? The school is out. Exactly. They knew that. They knew the call volume was going to be really high between 3 and 4 because the school was out. And the kids would just go to the public phones, dial 911, and run. That's it. And there was no education behind it. So I think that's something you have to keep in mind, that a lot of the callers that call 911 are not familiar with our system, how it works. Maybe their kids are getting the education, but the people, the adults, they don't know. To the point where they're saying, why call 911? They're never going to show up because that's their reference from their own country. Why call? They're not going to show up. So that's the challenge your dispatchers are having every single day. The caller is not aware how we work. So what can we do about it? If you have the possibility, if there's a means behind it, educate the public. And I think that's vital to your success and their success. Educate them that you have 911 to help them. The information that they share with you will stay at your center. It's confidential, and you're there to help. And that's what they want to hear. But you're changing a paradigm. You're changing a mindset of these people. And hopefully that will make your dispatchers' lives a lot easier. families. When you say, these are my children, you mean children, 5, 7, 8 years old, right? In some cultures, when you say children, I'm talking about my 18-year-old, 19-year-old. They're my children. And for us, our references, our children, they're 7, 8, 9 years old. They're little people and not adults. And so when someone calls in, my child is in trouble, your dispatcher might be thinking, what is it? Why are they in trouble? And not knowing that they're 18, 19 years old. So clarifying question makes a difference. Brothers and sisters. When someone says brother and sister, what do we mean by that? You're talking about blood. But in other cultures, when you say brother and sister, they're talking about the same country or the same region of where they're coming from. So my brother could be from that country or city that they were from. So it's not a real brother, it's a brother because they came from the same country. Surnames. We're used to having maybe one surname, but in different cultures, they might have several. My name is Jose Martinez Gonzalez Cervantes de Reyes. Which is the one you have to use? You don't know. They have a whole bunch of surnames. And again, as a dispatcher, if you don't know this information, it makes your life difficult. But you don't know what's their last name. Family ties. Very tight. Very tight family in different cultures. That even to the degree that mother, father will protect their children to the extreme. And you have to keep that in mind. In different cultures, the family is very, very crucial. And that's what it is. Very important, traditional roles of men. In some cultures, what the man says goes. And the question is, if she's being beat up, whatever, she takes it because, again, part of the culture is that's the way he's shown me love. For our society, like, heck no. That is not acceptable. We've got to do something about it. But if you try to get involved, then the problem comes in. So the question is, what can we do about it? Just understand. Understand the relationship between family, surname, children, all this. Education of your staff. Because the more they know, the frustration hopefully goes down. Because these calls are not easy. As you can see, there's a lot of elements. A lot of elements. To conclude, a call is a call, very easy to take, but when you get language involved, it gets complicated. As 911 people that we are in sharing information, your dispatchers, their job is not easy. To take English calls and not even language calls. So hopefully I've given you an insight of some of the challenges they encounter. Because again, language is very difficult. However, with some of these ideas, hopefully the life of a dispatcher becomes easier. Lastly, I do have handouts of some of these points if you like to take it back to your center. Thank you. Oh yeah, questions. So yeah, we have questions here.
Typically, when the dispatcher picks up the phone and somebody's speaking in a foreign language,
Correct.
It's not a language they recognize, oh, they're speaking in Spanish or whatever, and so they call for an interpreter.
Correct.
What kind of time delay are we talking about? How long does it take to actually establish communications between the calling person and the dispatcher with the interpreter?
Normally speaking, depending on the language, it all depends on the language. Here in California, 89% of the calls that are requested are in Spanish. we understand that and we bulk up on our Spanish interpreters. Normally speaking, we try to get an interpreter less than 60 seconds. Okay, that's the goal. However, there's a lot of factors involved. If everybody calls at once, it makes it very difficult to have enough interpreters for that particular time that you call. But our rate, we try to get in less than 60 seconds. Yes, Desi.
Just for Kent's, I brought up my language line report just to share that with you. For my Spanish calls, my average connection time was less than 5 seconds. It was 2.2. But for Vietnamese, it did take 60 seconds. So you can see with those rare languages, it does seem to take longer. But for the Spanish languages, and as a typical for those that aren't in dispatch, for the city of Hayward, typical month, I had 1,117 minutes of language in a month. So 18 hours a month in language translation services for my city.
Yeah, because overall, like I say, for 2013, 91 different languages were requested. Number one being Spanish, Mandarin, Vietnamese, Cantonese, Korean, Russian, Arabic, Farsi, Punjabi. Those are top languages here in California. And you're talking about over 348,000 calls in a year. Okay, this is including 911 centers and CHP. We're talking over 1.7 million minutes, okay, of requesting languages being interpreted. Okay, so you can see the magnitude here in California and the importance. Yes?
Picking up on what Kent asked, what kind of a decision matrix does that person who first answers the language line to request an interpreter, what kind of a logic process do they go through to identify the language?
First of all, we break it down to regions. Spanish, Middle Eastern, Asian language. So from there, we break it down, the possibilities. And then from there, if we think it's an Asian language, then we look at all the other languages, Mandarin, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Korean, and break it down that direction. But everything is based on breaking down by the Middle East, Asian, or Spanish. Did I answer your question? No.
Not precisely. Let's say you're the person that I have brought on the line to interpret,
Correct.
and you hear the language that is spoken. Would you have the training to be able to do that first sort, Middle East, Asian?
Yeah, exactly, we do. Because again, basically, and that's the only thing we do, listen to languages. So therefore, for like my example about the Russian and Ukrainian, we hear that they're asking for a Russian interpreter and we provide them with a Russian interpreter. But then during that call, we figure out that maybe they're speaking Ukrainian or another language in the USSR. Then we could bring that interpreter in line. Yeah, again, you're talking about experience here. Yes, Desi.
I don't know if other dispatchers noticed it, but in the old days, in the AT&T days, one thing it seemed like the interpreters used to take more control of the caller, and really they kind of fed us information instead of us having to do a literal translation. Is that a policy change with Language Line, or could Language Line go back to teaching their people more of what we need?
The challenge is this, is that interpreters, there's some agencies love when the interpreters take charge. They know, because they have the experience of taking calls so often that they know what information a dispatcher needs, which is address, what's the emergency, bang, bang, bang. They know the information. However, there's some agencies, they don't want to let go of that control. They want us to follow. Whereas like, interpreter, wait until I say something before you ask those questions. Because all the interpreters, to become interpreter, not just because you speak the language, you become interpreter, like myself. Did I impress you with my Spanish? Yeah, you did. I did. But again, I'm not an interpreter. That's why I'm doing this. Because I didn't pass the exam to become an interpreter. It's a science to become an interpreter. So you got to pass an exam in the language you're going to be interpreting and speak English or pass that exam in English. Then after that, we provide them training, the ones that are going to be handling 911 calls, on information from your center, on the questions you ask, if it's a police call, fire truck, or ambulance, down the list. So they're familiar with your environment, but not the expert. Because the experts are you. You're dispatchers. We just lead. So going back to your question, it's hard because you have two camps. Some centers, they say, take control. Others saying, hey, back off. Take my lead. But you're there to relay my message. Yes?
To me, just to kind of go along with that, to me, the best interpreters were the ones that took control but didn't necessarily know what the questions were, but got the caller to stay focused on what the question was, not let them ramble into a story and
Yep.
you got to interrupt. It's more of, you can tell the interpreter taking control by keeping them focused. To me, that's what's the most important. We can give you the questions, but to keep them on track.
Yeah, maybe that's kind of.
Yeah,
it's the
good point.
Control of that conversation.
See, and that's oh, go ahead.
Do your interpreters visit comm centers, or is it just here's what you expect when you get the calls, or do they actually go out?
We try to expose them, but not as much. We would just give them that training on what they should be expecting. And this is the interesting part, because most of you have not worked in a call center or in a dispatch center. The challenges that dispatchers encounter is incredible. Like Desi was saying and Sherry was saying, is that having the language services or having the interpreter there, that brings up a whole set of problems. You know, it's hard enough dealing with an English-speaking caller. Then you're bringing in the interpreter on the line, and you're just waiting there, and the caller and the interpreter are just talking, and you're like, okay, folks, hurry up, I need a dispatch here. Look at the frustration. Feel that pain. It's not easy. So you have to. We all have to admire the dispatchers, what the job they do. Because again, I think that's sometimes the missing piece that we miss, that they go through a lot. Yes?
Do the interpreters work from a call center or do they work from home?
Both. We have people that work from home because our philosophy is we go where the talent is. So if we find an interpreter that speaks well from the state of Washington, that speak very well in Mandarin or Cantonese, we hire them, we set them up at home, and they just connect. And when they're on that shift, they're working that shift for those 8 hours.
Follow up.
Yes?
Are they designated to a particular PSAP band, or are they open to support different centers?
They're open to all PSAPs and industries. Okay? And that's where it becomes very efficient for everybody. But they open up to all industries. Because again, think about it. Interpreting services are always needed everywhere when there's contact. Hospitals, banks, insurance, and down the list. 911 is part of it, but there's a whole different industry that use interpreting services, government agencies. Go ahead.
This is off the top of it, but following what you just said, language is an issue in lots of areas.
Yep.
Yesterday I had a meeting with the Emergency Alert System and the National Weather Service. They issue a tornado warning in English and voice and text, and somehow that needs to be translated into whatever number of languages very, very rapidly, and so they don't know how to deal with it.
And that's another good point, and I'll leave you with that thought. How are you going to handle texting in a foreign language? Okay, if you're hearing all these challenges, voice. How about texting? With that, I'm gone.